HPPodcraft.com.
Myth or otherwise, the sculptures told of the coming of those star-headed things to the nascent, lifeless Earth out of cosmic space. Their coming, and the coming of many other alien entities, such as at certain times embark upon spatial pioneering. They seemed able to traverse the interstellar ether on their vast membranous wings, thus oddly confirming some curious hill folklore long ago told me by an antiquarian colleague. They had lived under the sea a good deal, building fantastic cities and fighting terrific battles with nameless adversaries by means of intricate devices employing unknown principles of energy. Evidently, their scientific and mechanical knowledge far surpassed man's today, though they made use of its more widespread and elaborate forms only when obliged to. Some of the sculptures suggested that they had passed through a stage of mechanized life on other planets, but had receded upon finding its effects emotionally unsatisfying. Their preternatural toughness made them able to live on a high plane without the more specialized fruits of artificial manufacture, and even without garments except for occasional protection against the elements.
Ladies and gentlemen, that is H.P. Lovecraft, the nudist.
No, Chad. That is the first paragraph of Chapter 7 of At the Mountains of Madness by H.P. Lovecraft.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. It did seem like some kind of advocacy for nudism.
No. I want to know who you are and what you're doing here.
My name is Chad Fifer. Who are you?
I'm Chris Lackey, and with us, not fortunately for him, physically, is Ian Culbard.
Hi, Ian. Glad to have you back.
And it's nice to be back.
Where are we talking to you from, by the way?
England.
Do you want to be that vague with it?
Yeah. That's a big island, man.
Do you have the mob after you? Or that's why you're being as vague as you are?
Yeah. Where specifically in the UK are you, my friend?
I'm in Nottingham.
Nottingham. It's a beautiful place, Nottingham.
Is it?
Yeah, I've been down there.
Yeah, what do they got?
They've got, well, there's a forest.
Mm-hmm.
There's a big forest. You might have heard of
There
that.
are trees.
And
Yeah.
trees. But no, it's a beautiful place, beautiful buildings. It's old. It's fairly happening. There's, 2 or 3 comic book stores there?
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Good that you mentioned comic book stores because our guest here, Ian, is a comic book author.
Author and artist.
He did the adaptation, which we didn't even mention in the last episode.
No.
He did a graphic novel. Sorry about that. He did a graphic novel adaptation of At the Mountains of Madness that is on sale in all of your reputable comic book shops. If they don't have it, you should ask them to order it, or just get it online from Amazon.
You can get it in France as well, where it's called Les Montagnes Hallucinées.
Ooh
I
la
think
la.
I've pronounced that correctly.
Oui.
And that's published by Achilleos in France.
Oh, great.
And Ian, you're working on the case of Charles Dexter Ward right now, yeah?
Yeah, published by Self-Made Hero.
You adapted the Dunwich Horror?
Yeah, with Rob Davis adapting it and me illustrating it. For the Lovecraft Anthology Volume 1, again for Self-Made Hero.
And it's great.
Let's talk a little bit about At the Mountains of Madness. That opening quote, read by reader Joe Freya, who's been with us the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
What is that? What's that talking about?
It is talking about the origin of life on Earth.
Oh my God!
This, Chad, I gotta say that this is probably my most favorite chapter of my most favorite H.P. Lovecraft story.
You started learning some stuff.
It's so exciting, and
Yeah.
I feel like when Lovecraft wrote The Mound, it was practice for this stuff. Like
Yeah.
this is the best. It's so exciting. It's so cool. It's so interesting and different. Oh, I love
I agree,
it so much.
because it's like when you guys were doing the program about the Mound, that's exactly what I was thinking. It's like when you get to mountains, that is like a dry run for mountains, because
Exactly.
essentially, yeah. And when he was doing that in the Mound, it was exciting, but God, this tops it.
Oh my gosh, yeah, totally buries it. I don't know if I'd say exciting in The Mound. you and I might disagree on that one, Ian, but definitely this is really exciting.
Well, I quite like the Mound, but we're a difference of opinion.
We
there.
are.
Yeah, we
We
definitely.
Totally.
The interesting thing in the last bit there is that it explains why these elder things have lived for millions of years without decaying, because they evolved to such a state that they don't need clothes, they don't need machines,
Yeah.
they don't need laptops.
No?
They don't need any of this stuff. In fact, everything with these creatures is somewhat organic and life-based. And in a paragraph after that, they talk about, they first had lived under the sea, and while they were there, they needed to create some kind of food. Now, I think in interstellar space, they actually needed no nutrients at all.
No.
That gets said later.
No.
But when they move to Earth, they put down their first month's rent, and they do the security deposit. They're like, well, we need something to eat, but there's nothing here yet. It's just a big, presumably, ball of hardened gas with water. They need to create some stuff, so they create Earth life, which is the Shoggoths.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in their experiments, they're just messing around with stuff, but they need food and they need workers, and so the Shoggoths are sort of their first Earth experiment.
Yeah.
And there's all these sort of side effects. There's these microorganisms, one-cell things, bacteria, and if it doesn't bother them, if it's not causing a problem, they just kind of let it go.
Yeah.
And these things have evolved into us and trees and complex organisms and all that stuff, man.
Yeah.
So that's what we are. That's all of our life is just sort of a side effect.
Right.
You know, an accident or...
A discarded part of the experiment.
Yeah.
This viscous material called the Shoggoths. Now, when he first says it in the story here, he puts quotes around it.
Yeah.
And then there's never quotes around it again.
I think the reason why the quotes are around it is it's referenced in the Necronomicon, Shoggoths. That's where he gets this word from.
Right.
And Abdul al-Hazred, the guy that wrote the Necronomicon, wasn't even sure if they were real. You know, he mentions them in the Necronomicon, but well, you know, they're legendary.
Yeah. Well, I think he was sure. Yeah. He just didn't want anybody. Even Abdul, who writes the Necronomicon, which is the most mind-blowing text of all time, even in that, he kind of hid some truth. He didn't want people to know that this was the real stuff. Yeah. But the Shoggoths are kind of worker bees, right?
Yeah.
They had helped build these cities and
they're immensely strong.
Exactly. They could lift big stone blocks and bring them up to the top of buildings and that kind of thing.
But the Shoggoths at this point were just water-based creatures because all life started in the water. And as a matter of record, you know, on Earth, 80% of all life is in the oceans.
It's still
today.
Yeah.
Today, 80% of all living things, 80% live in the oceans.
Yeah.
That's crazy. But obviously, that's where the good stuff happens, and that's why the Shoggoths are down there. Because
do you think 80% of good stuff is still happening down there? There's parties we haven't been invited to at all.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It also references here the old ones. They had different lifestyles for different depths. Those who were on the top, they were closer to the surface. They're writing and they're sculpting. And those that are deeper down, they start physically. They develop phosphorescence and that kind of thing when they're at the different depths. Yeah. And they're super tough. Like, even the old ones that are way, way, way deep down in highly pressurized parts of the abyss, they're not... It doesn't bother them at all. Nothing's going to implode them.
These guys are pretty... I mean, they can survive interstellar space and the deepest pressures of the ocean. So they're just tough.
This stuff was so neat. So they reproduce through spores, much like vegetables. But they really don't reproduce that much unless they want to colonize another part of the planet, right? Because they're sort of immortal in a way.
Yeah, they don't die. They only die by accidental death, and that doesn't happen very often.
Or by a murder. They can live off of inorganic substances if they want to, but they do prefer meat.
So vegetarianism is an option.
It is an option, yeah.
Well, not even vegetarianism.
They could eat rock.
I mean, they could even go from that. They don't need to eat that. They could just be photosynthetic. He says that when they're out in space, they can use the sun's energy to, power themselves. They don't need to. But when they get to Earth, they decide that they want to eat meat.
Yeah, they have a personality, and it's kind of that makes them a little sinister.
Absolutely.
They prefer to create something that they can then hunt and kill and eat. And it gives them a little bit of personality.
Yeah, absolutely.
At that point, we're just looking at it's sort of a fossil record. This is what they were, but that, and it's sort of when you're a kid and you, the dinosaurs that you prefer, the carnivores, or at least me, I'd hear about the brontosaurus and I'd think, meh.
Whatever.
That guy just ate veggies. Get me onto the guy who killed things. That's the interesting stuff.
Well, it's much
or like in the Jurassic Park movie, he's basically a cow.
Right.
So it's nice. And then I'm thinking, because I'm a meat eater, so you can eat it.
Yep.
It's funny, but they also talk about how when they were doing their building at this point too in the story, they were using pterodactyls to lift big heavy things out. Because at this point the Shoggoths were still confined to underwater, and when they started doing stuff on the land, they were manipulating dinosaurs to do work for them. Well, another interesting fact too that Lovecraft talks about is that these things they don't really have family structures like mammals do. But they do have relationships, and they sort of have they dwell with some others, and they sort of form these bonds. But it's not like a mammalian families, and they're not attached to their offspring and things as humans are.
Yeah, they live in kind of communes or relationship sets or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Which is a little similar to the Kinyan stuff.
Yeah.
Remember where those immortal guys?
They had affection groups.
They had affection groups that they call them.
And it says in one of the actual quotes, he says government was complex and probably socialistic.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
do you think that do you think there's anything aspirational in this writing? Do you think that Lovecraft's view of political systems was changing at all, or is this simply? I mean, what do you think this?
I know a lot of Lovecraft's writing, he was pretty socialist in his letters and things that came across, and I think in his mind, in an idealized society, that's just the way things would be, and that everybody, again, and it's the same as it was in Kinyan. Yeah, everybody's got time to enjoy and appreciate art and science and learning, and people aren't worried about having to eat or getting medical attention and all those stuff, which I think is a pretty cool thing to aspire to.
They have money.
Yeah, which is remember those crazy soapstone star things.
Oh, is that what that is?
Yeah.
It says small flat counter. I guess that is what it.
Well,
So
no.
when they discovered the soapstone, they just found like some pirate gold.
It could be. Wait, hold on. Probably the smaller of the various greenish soapstones found by our expedition were pieces of such currency.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. All kinds of life forms grew out of the Shoggoth creation, and I love how they say some escaped notice. They exterminated some of them.
Yeah.
If it was bothersome to them, they'd wipe it out. But otherwise, it's really interesting how they're kind of negligent. It seems like if it was bad science fiction, they would have been complete masters of the whole planet. But there's room for error there, where they just kind of started making stuff, and some things flaked off, and they didn't really pay attention to it because they had their own things going on.
Right.
That's really cool. They're making mistakes,
Which is sort of similar to humans.
Yeah,
and there's
all the time.
There's a parallel, and that later on is going to pay off, and I think that's where Lovecraft's kind of building to. But continue.
One thing that they see in some of these sculptures that's chilling is they see the elder things, or the old ones as they're called now, kind of making fun of some simian-like shapes.
Yeah. Simians that are very similar to humans.
Where they're like picking on them or making fun of them or something like that.
Making some jokes about monkeys.
Which I think if before we were weighing, is it a mistake or a joke? I think I'm pretty heavy on the joke side now after that. A little bit there. It's a pretty good one, really, the joke.
Right, yeah. That's a good joke.
We're fools. The original place of advent to the planet was the Antarctic Ocean. That's where they came first. That was their bachelor apartment to begin with. And it's likely that they came not long after the moon was wrenched from the South Pacific.
Yeah.
Now, did that happen?
That is a theory that the Earth was hit, long time ago, before anything, when it was still kind of hot and just forming, that either it collided with another planet or there was some kind of asteroid.
Well, he's not talking about another planet here. He's saying the moon came out of the Earth.
No, something hit the Earth, and when it hit the Earth, a big piece of it broke off, and that was the moon.
Well, I think they call that the fission theory, that the moon came from the Earth. People dismiss that eventually because they say that moon then should contain some kind of fossil evidence of the Earth, but it doesn't. But now I think it's the giant impactor theory is what it's called, which Chris was just saying, which is that a small planet struck the Earth around the formation of the solar system, and a bunch of heated material came off of both objects, and the moon formed from this material. So there, it is part of the Earth, but it's also part of something else, and that's what the moon is.
But I believe that moon rock is not common to Earth either.
Right,
so,
exactly. Yeah. So something else was involved. There was some third party that got in there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Hot.
Yeah.
That's what I say. Yeah. There's lots of science here. I mean, there's the Pangea stuff comes in. Am I saying that right? Pangea?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
When all the continents were connected at one point, he brings that up lots of times. In fact, it says here...
With the upheaval of new land in the South Pacific, tremendous events began. Some of the marine cities were hopelessly shattered. Yet that was not the worst misfortune. Another race, a land race of beings shaped like octopi and probably corresponding to the fabulous pre-human spawn of Cthulhu, soon began filtering down from cosmic infinity and precipitated a monstrous war which, for a time, drove the Old Ones wholly back to the sea, a colossal blow in view of the increasing land settlements. Later, peace was made, and the new lands were given to the Cthulhu spawn, whilst the Old Ones held the sea and the older lands. New land cities were founded, the greatest of them in the Antarctic, for this region of first arrival was sacred. From then on, as before, the Antarctic remained the center of the Old One civilization, and all the discoverable cities built there by the Cthulhu spawn were blotted out. Then suddenly the lands of the Pacific sank again, taking with them the frightful stone city of Relay and all the cosmic octopi, so that the Old Ones were again supreme on the planet, except for one shadowy fear about which they did not like to speak. At a rather later age, Their cities dotted all the land and water areas of the globe. Hence the recommendation in my coming monograph that some archaeologists make systematic borings with Peabody's type of apparatus in certain widely separated regions.
Wow. All right, before we get into the actual contents of that paragraph, I just want to say this whole story is written to discourage explorers from checking out the Antarctic, okay? And at the end of that paragraph, he says, I have a recommendation that archaeologists should go start boring into other parts of... What is he talking about?
Yeah.
Why does he want archaeologists to do that?
Yeah.
It seems contradictory to me.
It does. I'm with you on this one.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Ian?
Yep.
Yeah.
That gets my vote. It is contradictory.
Good. But there's some crazy stuff in there. We get Cthulhu mythos.
Oh my
stuff in that,
God! It's blowing my mind. It's so exciting. We get some perspective on Cthulhu. You know, it's not just a god, and this is sort of where things are changing. Because before, Cthulhu was this unknowable, crazy thing that existed. It was a god. Cthulhu was a god.
It's a god sleeping in the ocean.
Now, Lovecraft is changing his mythos to make Cthulhu into an alien. It's not a god. It's an advanced form of alien life that we can never understand, but it's still quantifiable. It's still measurable, and it had some kind of agenda, and it had a war with the other things.
Yeah.
And it kind of kicked their ass too.
I know. They had to go back home.
Right, yeah. They went back to Antarctica and had to, lick their wounds and just kind of deal with it. But then fate changed for them, and Relay, due to some kind of cataclysm, sunk, went into the ocean. So what's going on? These things offer so many more questions than answers. I want to know exactly, maybe when it sunk, there was some other thing that was involved. It didn't just... You would think that they're so advanced they would know when a city sinks, that there's a reason for it, and if Cthulhu's trapped down there, why is he trapped?
I don't know. It's been referenced a couple of times that all of these cities sinking into the ocean. In a few Lovecraft stories, it's been referenced.
Right.
But the actual cause of it might just be geological. It might just be something that happened with the planet. I think he wants to leave that open because every mythology has a flood myth, and so it kind of ties in with our perceived history of the planet.
Well, he brings that up a lot. He brings up Lemuria. He brings up Atlantis. He doesn't believe it's... Lovecraft has said that he doesn't think Atlantis ever was real or existed, but it's just really interesting, and it's exciting to think of these lost civilizations that somehow got too big for their britches and didn't anticipate certain things like this big cataclysm that was going to happen and sink the city.
Up until this point, we've had everything that's been going on the children's table at the party, and then we get to this bit, and this is the grown-ups table, and this is the real thing that's actually been going on. Little things like the worship of him as a god, that's a human perception of it, an earthly thing.
Yeah.
Whereas in actual fact, this is the real situation of what was going on. They moved in, they were terrible neighbors. They had a big fight. They kept lighting their barbecues late at night, so it kept the kids awake with the parties. And
it's so interesting that you say that, Ian, because while I was reading this, I actually feel like At the Mountains of Madness is, and it's a really simple metaphor, but it is a metaphor for the transition from childhood to adulthood. Because these explorers go out to the Antarctic very innocent, very hopeful.
Yeah.
And they don't really know about this part of the world.
Right.
So, I feel like you start life, you've got this sense of adventure and innocence, and slowly you begin to learn about the adult world.
Yes.
And because you're not a part of it. It is completely alien to you when you're a child. And you do it through observation, maybe not of what you're told, but of what adults are leaving behind. Their photos, their television programs, not the ones they're telling you to watch, but the ones they watch. Things that are part of their culture and their art. And slowly, as you begin to understand the culture, you start to understand that there's also some perversion to it and some cruelty and a little bit of nobility as well. And then ultimately, you understand that you are a product of some accident in this adult world.
Yeah.
That you are. Right? You're and hopefully you're loved by your parents, but the vastness of the adult culture in the world, it dwarfs you. And you as you gain in age, you learn your own insignificance. And then eventually you finally find respect for adults because you enter their world when you become an adult.
And then sadly, as a parent, you realize that they're just big kids with more responsibilities.
Exactly. But, and I don't want to preview the end of this too much, but I think that once you finally have that realization and you find your place in that world, that's when death starts creeping out of the tunnel.
Yeah.
And you start to have a realization that that's coming. And, you do everything you can to escape it, but eventually you're going to glimpse back and you're going to see it.
Dude, that is
Yeah.
that is very insightful, man.
Yeah, 100%, because I think it ties in with a fundamental thing that I saw in the book when I first read it, which is it's a revelatory thing that goes from everything is about, oh my God, this is the big thing, but there are bigger revelations to come.
There are, and we'll get into it when we.
It's another thing too, Chad, when you were talking about how people worshipped Cthulhu, and it's such a primitive thing that when humans don't understand things, they make them into gods. You know, when the sun was a god.
Yeah.
Like, what is this thing? So let's worship it. Let's kill things. Let's do things for this. And it doesn't care. Like, the sun doesn't care if you're killing things and doing things for it. And just like that, Cthulhu doesn't care if you're worshiping him or doing any of this stuff. Like, it's so...
Even does Honey Badger.
Honey Badger don't care.
Honey Badger doesn't care, which is why I now worship the Honey Badger.
No, but it doesn't care about you, Chad.
I don't.
Don't worship the Honey Badger.
So
it won't get you anything. It won't give you anything.
We'll see what happens. As more landmasses form on Earth, the old ones begin to migrate up there, and part of this is so that they can use life forms on land to do their dirty work. Now, some of these things that weren't Shoggoths that kind of spawned off and developed and evolved, they kind of need them now because over the lifespan, the old ones have forgotten how to create life.
Yeah.
And so they have to rely on the Shoggoths that are already in existence.
Right.
And those are only kind of sea animals. They're the Shoggoths of the sea.
Yeah, right.
They refer to a couple of times, which would be like the worst SeaWorld exhibit ever. Just formless masses floating in the water and scare you.
One of those things, too, that I find so fascinating about this is life changes so quickly from an eons kind of scale for humanity. I mean, humans have only really been around for, a few tens of thousands of years, as opposed to the old ones, the elder things, are thinking in millions of years. You know what I mean? So we have so limited of an understanding of even 1,000 years ago for our civilization, our history and stuff. So think of how much gets lost or how much things change for millions of years. And them, it's even if it's really, really slow, it's still... it's just so amazing. It's so interesting
you think about the Republic of Rome and everything that was possible in that southern part of Europe.
Yeah.
And it was a very modern society. And then we had the Middle Ages. We had the medieval Dark Ages, where people forgot
how to do things.
Really technologically.
Well, to be fair as well, I mean, when you look at Inuit fishing communities, and there's certain skills that are lost within one generation.
Yeah.
So it just takes one generation of people to forget something.
Wow.
That's even more scary. I mean, from Rome, at least we got straight roads and indoor plumbing. And
hey, man, my dad could fix any car. Any car. Just could fix it. Not this guy.
But here's the thing too about that I find this so exciting and interesting is our society is I think of it as when we build technology, you're building like a tower out of blocks, and that it gets higher and higher because technology builds on technology that builds on technology, and if something tips that tower over, those top blocks are for sure going to get lost. And how many of those blocks are going to fall down? If for some reason our culture, maybe some kind of disease happens or some kind of global catastrophe, we're going to be starting back to maybe Dark Ages again. Build engines and gasoline. Like it's so hard to. I have no idea how to make gasoline, how to find the materials, and everything is just built on something else. It's built on something else. It's built on, and it's so precarious. That's what I'm trying to say.
Here's another thing that can go wrong. Your slaves can get willful.
Yep.
And that's what happens with the Shoggoths of the sea. They acquire a dangerous degree of accidental intelligence, which presents a formidable problem.
Yeah.
They had always been controlled through the hypnotic suggestion of the old ones, and had modeled their tough plasticity into various useful temporary limbs and organs. But now their self-modeling powers were sometimes exercised independently, and in various imitative forms implanted by past suggestion. They were normally shapeless entities composed of a viscous jelly, which looked like an agglutination of bubbles, and each averaged about 15 feet in diameter when a sphere. They had, however, a constantly shifting shape and volume, throwing out temporary developments or forming apparent organs of sight, hearing, and speech in imitation of their masters, either spontaneously or according to suggestion.
That's really horrible.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you draw that?
The first thing it's going to learn to do is it's going to learn to backchat, isn't it? It's going to learn to backtalk, I suppose, as you would say, or whatever the phrase is. But it would be straight away in there with, it would learn sarcasm straight off the bat.
Well, I think of a Planet of the Apes. The first ape that said no. Caesar?
Yeah.
Caesar, yeah.
Right, exactly. Well, and toward the middle of the Permian Age, which is about 150 million years ago, it's war.
Of the resubjugation.
Yeah.
That's what they call it, the War of the Resubjugation. So you know how it turns out.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Skip to the end.
Well, hey, I'm on the Shoggoth side. Those are my people.
Yeah, they're pretty cool.
Well,
There are
yeah.
people. That's we're from those guys.
But in the Shoggoths, they don't kid around. The headless, slime-coated fashion in which they typically left their slain victims held a marvelously fearsome quality despite the intervening abyss of untold ages. They're looking at this in the sculptures and the bas-reliefs, seeing how the Shoggoth dispatched their enemies.
Yeah.
It's pretty gruesome.
It's gruesome. Cut their heads off. Boom.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's almost a little bit of the French Revolution there,
Yeah, it is. I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
But, the old ones have some curious weapons. What does it say? Curious weapons of molecular disturbance.
Yeah, some
That's
kind
what
of
they...
death rays.
Atom.
The atom bomb.
Oh,
The atom bomb.
right, yeah.
So you get your first atomic explosion in the Antarctic, which is kind of, that's pretty scary.
Yeah, I didn't even put that together. I was just thinking of death rays. I just thought they had some...
Well, heck, to Lovecraft it's a death ray because that hasn't happened yet. But that's...
No.
Yeah, that's right.
They said this is getting out of hand. The Shoggoths will never surrender, so we have to...
Nuke them.
Yeah.
Boom.
Yeah.
But after that happened, the Shoggoths were tamed.
They were tamed and broken as the wild horses of the American West were tamed by cowboys.
Oh.
Suddenly throws out like a rawhide reference. You know what I mean? It just seemed like so out of nowhere. But, during the rebellion, the Shoggoths had shewn an ability to live out of water. But that wasn't encouraged. They didn't want that to happen.
Yeah, so they kept the Shoggoths in the water and got rid of any kind of genetic modifications that might have happened naturally.
Now, during the Jurassic Age, the old ones met fresh adversity in the form of a new invasion from outer space.
Yeah.
What's that all about?
The half fungus, half crustacean creatures from Yuggoth.
Yeah.
The Migos. So he's bringing back into this story the stuff that he did in Whisper in Darkness, all the stuff with the Migos and what's going on with him, which makes it really exciting because Migos are still around and they're doing stuff.
Yeah.
And he talks about Wilmarth here and how Wilmarth was telling him all these things and he's piecing it all together. Oh man, it's so cool.
Yeah, so they had to go back home again.
Yeah.
But also during that war, they wanted to go back out into space maybe, and they couldn't remember how to do it.
They don't remember how to go out into
space. But
space.
it's funny, it says... they attempted to sally forth again into the planetary ether. It's just funny. They had to sally forth. I don't know why that's funny to me. But these battles in the text let us know that the old ones, they're made of different stuff than the Migo or the Cthulhu spawn, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The old ones are material. They're made of the same junk that we are, but...
Yeah. But the Migos and Cthulhu spawn are interdimensional, weird. Remember in Whisper in Darkness how when they tried to take pictures of him, it didn't work because...
Or in Call of Cthulhu, when they hit him with a boat, he explodes in a puff of smoke.
Yes, and then reforms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're not... There's something about their material that's just not even earthly.
They're not on any... They're totally different than us. Not carbon-based life forms. Who knows what the heck these things are made of? But with the elder things, we're of their same kind of stock. They seem to have some kind of cell structure like we have.
So the whole war, I mean, it appears that some kind of truce was made or something like that. And basically, they say, you get Vermont and we'll move back to Antarctica. They create a new city in Antarctica, and in the new city, many of the features of which Dyer and Danforth can recognize in the sculptures, this is where they are right now. So they've followed the whole story of the history of the Earth. And they've gotten to their present location.
And the Migo, we've covered that they got banished to the... Well, they're not banished. They settled in the Himalayas.
Right, I said Vermont, but they're in the Himalayas. Well, they're in the Himalayas too, because that's how we get the abominable snowman and that sort of thing, right? Yeah, you're correct.
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely.
Because some connection with the Tibetan Migo, which is Yeti.
Yeah,
right.
It's been a word for Yeti.
Yeah.
So that's where they are now. And obviously, Dyer and Danforth are very interested in the news about this particular city that they're in. They're going to study a little bit more about that, and I think that'll get us into our next episode.
Yeah, that's kind of rounds up chapter 7 for us. And yeah, I think that'll...
We got more to go, but not too much more.
Not much more. It's almost the end of chapter 7, but there's some cool stuff that we'll tag on to the end.
There's some chase scenes, and there's some...
Oh my gosh.
There's good stuff. So, Ian, once again, you'll join us next week?
Absolutely.
All right, great. We're going to get into our 6th episode next week.
Wow.
I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us. I want to say thanks to Joe Freya for doing our readings. Also, thanks to Reber Clark for continually providing the good stuff.
Oh, it's so great. It sounds wonderful. It makes
Yeah.
this show so much more exciting with this music.
I want to thank Mike Mann for helping us out with the tech side of things.
Great job, Mike.
Brooke Burgess for being a really cool person in general.
Thank you so much, Brooke.
And that's all we got. With that, I'm Chad Fifer.
I'm Chris Lackey.
And this has been the HP
And I'm Ian
Love.
Culbard.
Oh, crap. Sorry. Go ahead.
And I'm Ian Culbard. I did it right on key. I was so used to doing it.
No, you were doing it right. Chad just,
Yeah, I'm
just
the fool.
steamrolled over you.
Yes!
And this has been the HP Lovecraft Literary Podcast.
At HPPodcraft.com.
Woo!
HPPodcraft.com.